At 9:12 on a Tuesday morning, I was standing in the conference room at North Point Title with my coat still on, because nobody had told me this was going to be a performance. The glass wall had North Point Title in frosted letters, and behind it were 14 people packed around a table meant for 10. My parents sat on one side with matching blue folders in front of them. My brother, Caleb, had his laptop open to a slide that said runway after close. 18 months. Two men in quarter zips I'd never met were flipping through the closing packet like they were deciding whether to order lunch. Aunt Lila had taken the chair by the coffee machine and was whispering to my cousin Mara, who kept looking at me and then looking away. I had been told to come sign one last form for the sale of the house on Hawthorne Lane, the house my grandparents had bought in 1978. The house with the crooked brick mailbox and the pencil marks still inside the pantry door, showing every year Caleb and I grew. What I walked into looked less like a closing and more like a board meeting where I was the agenda problem. Priya Menon, the closing attorney, stood at the far end with a neat stack of documents and a yellow legal pad. She had a silver pen clipped to her blazer and one of those calm faces people get when they have already seen 3 families behave badly before breakfast. "Rowan, good," my mother said, not smiling. "We're already behind." I checked the clock above the framed notary certificate. 9:13. "I came as soon as I got your text." I said, "You were supposed to be here at 9, Dad muttered. Caleb didn't look up from his laptop. "Can we please not do the Rowan thing today?" That was the first public cut, not the worst one. I set my bag on the only empty chair, but before I could sit, Aunt Lila gave a small laugh and said, loud enough for the investors, "Just so everyone knows, Rowan needs to feel important before she signs anything. It's kind of her hobby." One of the quarter-zip men smiled into his coffee. My face got hot, and I hated that it did, because that made it look like she had hit something true. "I'd like to read what I'm signing," I said. Mom's hand moved fast over her folder, pressing it closed. "It's standard, Priya has explained it." Priya looked up at that, but she didn't interrupt. On the credenza behind her sat a banker's box with a white label. Hawthorne Lane, deed, tax receipts, transfer. The lid was slightly crooked. A red file folder stuck out from under it, and on top of the stack nearest Priya was the closing packet, clipped with black binder clips and flagged with neon tabs. My name appeared on one tab in blue ink. Not the kids. Not heirs. Rowan. Caleb finally turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a clean little chart with bars going up. "This sale funds the seed match," he said, using his investor voice. "If we don't close today, we lose the wire window. Then payroll gets weird, and 10 people who actually believe in me get punished because you want to play lawyer." "I'm not playing anything," I said. "I didn't get copies." Dad leaned back and rubbed his forehead like I'd brought a toddler to court. "Because every time we include you early, you spiral." That was when my mother said it. She looked straight at the investors, not at me, and said, "Rowan has always had trouble separating family support from personal sabotage. We're managing it. Managing it. Like I was a weather delay. Like I had wandered in barefoot with a conspiracy board. Instead of coming to sign papers, they had demanded I sign Priya's. Pen stopped moving. I picked up the chair by its back and pulled it out slowly, because if I moved too fast, everyone would say I was dramatic. I sat down, I unzipped my bag, I took out my reading glasses, my phone, and the folded tax receipt my grandfather had mailed me years ago with a sticky note that said, "Keep house papers together." I did not leave, because my name was on that tab. My grandfather's handwriting was in my bag, and everyone in that room was suddenly very interested in me not reading page 1. Before I tell you what was on page 1, you need to understand why everyone in my family expected me to have the receipt and still expected me to stay quiet. I'm Rowan Vale. I was 32 that morning, and I worked as a records coordinator for the county library system, which is exactly as glamorous as it sounds. My desk had a scanner that jammed every third Thursday, a label maker with one good cartridge, and 3 drawers full of donation forms from people who swore their grandmother's cookbook collection was museum quality. My flaw, according to my mother, was that I made simple things complicated. What that meant in practice was that I read before signing. I asked who had the original. I wrote dates on envelopes. I kept the warranty card for the sump pump because my dad once threw away the manual and then blamed me when the basement on Hawthorne Lane flooded. If you've ever been the person in your family who knows where the birth certificates, spare keys, and tax receipts are, tell me where you're watching from, because I swear every family has one of us. And if you want the rest of this closing room mess, hit like and subscribe now, because Priya was about to ask for the one thing my family had been pretending didn't exist. I became the records person after my grandfather died. not in a noble cinematic way. It happened because nobody else wanted to sit at his kitchen table the week after the funeral and sort the envelopes he had stacked in coffee cans. Grandpa Everett labeled everything in blue ballpoint. Roof, 2009. Chimney liner, property tax. Hawthorne deed do not toss. My mother cried for 10 minutes, then said she couldn't do paperwork, grief. My dad had a golf league. Caleb was 24 and already pitching his first app to anyone who would hold still. So I stayed at the table with a trash bag, a staple remover, and Grandpa's old magnifying glass. That was where I first saw the words transfer clause. I didn't understand them then. I was 26, still paying off my master's degree. And the most complicated document I handled was a library vendor contract for copier toner. The deed was a recorded copy from the county, folded into thirds, with a raised seal pressed so hard into the corner it had cracked the paper. Attached behind it was a page with Grandpa's initials, my grandmother's initials, and a paragraph that named me Rowan Elise Vale. Not Mom, not Caleb, me. When I asked my mother about it, she took the page from my hand, stared at it too long, and said, "Your grandfather was sentimental. Don't build a shrine out of bureaucracy." Then she put it back in the folder upside down. That stuck with me. By the time North Point Title called the week before the closing, I already had scanned copies of the deed, the tax receipt file, and the transfer page saved in 3 places. My laptop, a flash drive in my pencil cup at work, and a cloud folder named Hawthorne_Lane Final, because I am annoying but not stupid. The call had come at 4:47 on a Tuesday while I was standing in aisle 7B of the downtown branch, reshelving local history books. "Ms. Vale," the woman asked. "This is Donnie from North Point Title. We're confirming attendance for Friday's closing on Hawthorne Lane." I said, "I'm not selling Hawthorne Lane." There was a pause, keyboard tapping, then a careful voice. "Your signature's listed as potentially required. Attorney Manon will review at the table." When I called Mom, she laughed like I had misheard. "Rowan, you're not required. They just put all family names in the packet. Please don't start. Why is there a tab with my name?" "Because title companies waste paper. At North Point, sitting under those fluorescent lights." I remembered that exact sentence when Priya Manon lifted the packet from the table and turned it toward herself instead of toward my mother. Before anyone signs, Priya said, "I need to verify the consent initials on the draft and compare them with the recorded deed." Mom's hand slid over the top page too quickly. "Priya, we're on a deadline," she said, smiling at the investors. Rohan gets overwhelmed by legal language. I opened my phone, tapped the voice memo app, and set it face down beside Grandpa's tax receipt. My brother Caleb sat 2 chairs down from me with his blazer sleeves pushed up like he was already on the cover of a business magazine. He had brought a leather portfolio with his startup logo embossed on the front, a white hexagon around the word Kitewell. It was a home care scheduling app, which sounded noble whenever he described it to strangers, and sounded like unpaid family errands whenever he needed me to test the spreadsheet at midnight. Dad kept touching Caleb's shoulder every few minutes, the way people do at weddings before the photographer clicks. "This is the next phase," he told one of the investors, a man named Greg who had a silver pen clipped to his pocket. Caleb's worked too hard to let a technicality slow him down. A technicality. That was what they called anything with my name on it. There were 14 people in that conference room if I counted Priya's assistant by the copier. Mom, Dad, Caleb, me, Aunt Leela, Uncle Pete. 2 cousins who had driven in because Mom said it was a family milestone, and 6 investors who kept checking the wall clock above the coffee station. The closing packet sat in the middle of the long table, thick as a church hymnal, with blue signature flags sticking out at odd angles. Mom had dressed for the room. Cream cardigan, pearl earrings, the soft voice she used at library fundraisers when she wanted everyone to remember she chaired the school auction in 2008. She squeezed my wrist under the table and whispered, "Don't embarrass your brother." I looked down at her hand. Her thumbnail was painted the same pale pink she always wore when she wanted to look harmless. For most of my life, Caleb was the project and I was the maintenance department. When he lost his birth certificate before his junior year internship, I was the one sent to stand in line at County Vital Records because I liked that sort of thing. When Dad couldn't find Grandpa Everett's property tax receipts for the homestead exemption review, I spent a Saturday on the dining room floor sorting manila folders by year while Caleb came in, took a picture of the mess, and said, "Rowan's in her natural habitat." Everybody laughed. I kept sorting because the penalty notice was real and the deadline was Monday. When Mom hosted investors at our house that March, I printed Caleb's 1-page projections at the library after he emailed them to me at 7:12 a.m. with the subject line, Need clean copies. No please, no attachment names. That made sense. Just 6 files called Final, Final 2, Realfinal, and use _this_1. At noon, Mom introduced me to the investors as our quiet one and then asked me to refill the iced tea. Now, in North Point title, Caleb leaned across the table toward Priya. Can we isolate the issue? He said. If Rowan needs reassurance, fine, but we have wires scheduled. Priya did not look up from the draft packet. She had placed a recorded deed on her left, Grandpa's tax receipt file in front of me, and the draft consent page on her right. With a yellow ruler, she lined up the margins like she was checking a map. Wires can wait for clean title, she said. Greg, the investor, clicked his silver pen once. Aunt Leela gave me a look that said I should smooth this over before someone important became annoyed. Dad cleared his throat. Rowan, honey, nobody is taking anything from you. Your grandfather wanted the family to be practical. That was Dad's favorite trick. Put words in a dead man's mouth and call it closure. Grandpa Everett had been practical. He labeled extension cords with masking tape. He kept appliance manuals in freezer bags. He made me learn where the water shutoff valve was before he let me plant tomatoes along the back fence. He also paid his taxes with checks, stapled the receipts to the notice, and wrote the parcel number on the folder tab in blue ink. The folder was under my palm right then. 2019 Webbit, 2020 2021. His handwriting, his system. Not Caleb's pitch deck, not Mom's public smile. Priya turned one page, then another. Her assistant came over with a photocopy from the scanner, still warm, and set it beside the draft. Priya tapped the bottom corner of the consent page. Mrs. Vale, she said carefully, who prepared this initial draft? Mom's smile tightened by 1 millimeter. Our agent sent it over. I may have organized the pages so we weren't wasting anyone's time. Caleb rubbed his forehead, Mom. It was the first crack in his confidence all morning, and it was small, but I noticed it because noticing small things was apparently my useless family talent. Priya slid the page closer to herself, not to Mom. I'm asking because the initials beside Rowan Elise Vale's name appear on a version dated last Thursday. Last Thursday, at 9:30 in the morning, I had been at the County Records Annex training a new clerk on retention schedules. I still had the parking receipt in my work bag. I reached for it slowly while Mom's fingers curled around the edge of her cream cardigan. I unzipped the front pocket of my work bag and pulled out the folded yellow parking receipt from the county garage. It still had a smear of blue copier toner on one corner because I'd set it beside the records machine while showing Denise, the new clerk, how to scan oversized plats. Priya took it with 2 fingers and read it without dramatics. County Garage, Annex B entry, 9:12 a.m., exit 11:03 a.m. last Thursday. Mom gave a small laugh, the kind she used when a waiter brought the wrong salad and she wanted everyone nearby to know she was being gracious. That doesn't prove anything except Rowan was downtown. It proves she was not at my office when this draft was printed for review at 9:38, Priya said, tapping the footer on the consent page. And it raises a question about who placed these initials here. Caleb shifted in his chair. His kitewell pitch deck was still open on the table, frozen on a slide with pale green icons of nurses and calendars. One of his investors, a man in a navy vest with a silver watch, leaned forward just enough to read the page upside down. Can we not turn this into a trial? Caleb said. Priya, what do you need to keep the closing moving? Priya looked at him. Accurate signatures, actual consent, and no altered drafts. The word altered landed harder than any accusation Mom had thrown at me. I took my phone from my bag next, because once I had the receipt in my hand, I remembered the email. That morning at the annex, Denise had asked me to send her the retention checklist because the county printer kept jamming. I opened my sent folder and searched retention. There it was. Thursday, 9:41 a.m. Sent from my county email to Denise Park, with the attachment named deedindex_retentionsteps.pdf. I turned the phone so Priya could see it. I sent this from the annex computer. The system only lets us send from inside the county network. Priya nodded once. Please forward that to me now. My card is in your packet. The closing packet in front of me was thick enough to prop open a door. Blue folder, silver clip, sticky flags on 3 signature pages. I found Priya's card tucked behind the wire instructions and typed her email carefully, because my hands were steady but my mother was watching every letter. Rowan, Mom said softly, you are making a spectacle of yourself. I hit send. At 2:18 p.m., Priya's laptop chimed. She opened the email, glanced at the header, and then saved it into a folder on her desktop labeled Veil Closing Supporting Docs. I noticed that because the projector screen behind her briefly mirrored her monitor before she clicked it off. "Thank you," she said. "I'll add this to the file." Dad finally spoke from the far end of the table. "Is that necessary?" "Yes," Priya said, "especially now." That was when I remembered the tax receipt file. It wasn't a dramatic memory. It was paper, staples, and the smell of the old metal cabinet in Grandpa's study. After his funeral, Mom had told me to clean out the drawers because she couldn't face all that dust. In the bottom drawer, behind a stack of appliance manuals, I'd found a red rope folder marked 2479 Hawthorne Lane taxes deed. Grandpa had kept every paid property tax receipt from 1998 forward, clipped by year, with his blocky handwriting across the top. I had taken it home because Mom said tax papers were clutter, and Caleb had joked that nobody needed museum paperwork. The folder was in my apartment, on the second shelf of my hall closet, between my passport box and a plastic bin of Christmas lights. I looked at Priya. "I have Grandpa's original tax receipt file. Not here, but I have it." Mom's smile tightened. "Why would you take family documents out of the house? Because you told me to throw them away?" I said. One of my aunts made a tiny noise, like she'd swallowed a cough. Priya wrote something on her legal pad. "Do not throw anything away. Bring that file to my office tomorrow morning. If the recorded deed references the same parcel and clause, I want the receipts preserved." Caleb rubbed both hands over his face. "Tomorrow morning? We have wires scheduled today." Priya closed the draft packet and placed the page with my supposed initials on top. "Then today's problem is not Rowan reading documents. Today's problem is that this closing packet contains a consent mark she is credibly disputing." Mom looked at me then, not like a mother caught making a mistake, but like I had failed to understand my role. That look took me straight back to 3 smaller moments I had trained myself to excuse. The first was a phone call on a wet Tuesday in March, 2 years after Grandpa died. I was in the break room at Miller and Chase with a plastic fork stuck into a grocery store salad, my phone buzzing against the vending machine. Mom's name filled the screen. "Rowan, quick," she said when I answered. In the background, I heard Caleb laughing, glasses clinking, somebody saying seed round like it was a magic spell. "Your brother is on with a potential advisor. Can you email him that old photo of your grandfather in front of Hawthorne Lane? The one where he's holding the brass key?" "I'm at work," I said. "I can do it tonight. It'll take you 30 seconds. It's on my laptop at home." She sighed, not angry yet, just disappointed in the practiced way. "You always make things harder than they need to be." I looked at the clock above the microwave. 12:17 p.m. My lunch was 20 minutes. I spent 15 of them remoting into my home computer from my phone, squinting through folders labeled Grandpa Scan, Estate, House, Misc, until I found the picture. Caleb replied with a thumbs up emoji. Mom didn't reply at all. The second was at Caleb's launch dinner at Bellwether on Grand Avenue. The night he announced the first version of his company with a slideshow and a rented projector that kept flickering blue. The reservation was under Vail Party, 16. And I arrived at 6:55 with a wrapped copy of Grandpa's fountain pen in my purse because Caleb had once said he wanted to sign his first office lease with it. The long table had name cards. Dad was near the investors, Mom was beside Caleb. Aunt Leila and Uncle Rob were placed where they could be seen in every photo. My card was at the far end, wedged between the coat rack and a high chair for my cousin's toddler. Mom caught me holding the card. "Oh, honey, don't start," she whispered, already smiling toward a man in a navy blazer. "The business people need to talk." I brought Caleb something. "Give it to him later. Tonight is about momentum." Later never came. Caleb left with the investors through the front door at 9:08, and I carried the wrapped pen home in the same tote bag as the dessert no one ate. The third was the paperwork favor. Dad called it that exactly. "Just a paperwork favor," he said, standing in my apartment doorway one Saturday morning with the manila envelope pressed flat against his chest. It was November, cold enough that his breath showed in the hall. "Your mom is in the car. We're running behind." Behind him, I could see her white SUV idling at the curb with the hazard lights blinking. "What paperwork?" "Property tax reimbursement thing. Old Hawthorne Lane file. The county needs consistency on mailing contact." I opened the envelope at my kitchen counter. The top page had my name typed under family representative, with 2 yellow sign here flags and 1 tiny initial box beside a paragraph I hadn't read yet. "I need coffee in 10 minutes, I said. Dad pinched the bridge of his nose. "Rowan, it's not a contract." "Then nobody should mind me reading it." He smiled, but it was the smile he used when a cashier asked for ID and he thought the rule was beneath him. You got that from your grandfather. Suspicious of everything? No. I got reading from him. Mom honked once outside. Dad glanced back, then lowered his voice. Your brother is trying to build something. We're all helping in different ways. I slid the page out from under the yellow flag and read until I found the parcel number. 2479 Hawthorne Lane. Same one printed on the tax receipts Grandpa had kept in the red rope folder. I told Dad I would scan it and send questions by email. He left without the signature, and Mom didn't call me for 9 days. Back at North Point Title, standing beside Priya Menon's conference table with 14 people waiting for me to be convenient, I realized those moments hadn't been separate. They had been practice. Mom still had that same patient, public smile on. Rowan, she said softly, as if kindness could hide the warning underneath. This is not the time to punish your brother over old feelings. I looked down at the closing packet, at the initial box that someone had tried to fill for me, and kept my hands flat on the table. I'm not punishing Caleb, I said. I'm reading. The summons came on a Tuesday at 7:18 a.m. While I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for the cheap kettle to click off, Mom sent it to the family thread first. The one named Hawthorne Lane, updates with a little house emoji Caleb had added years ago. Rowan, we need you at North Point Title this Friday at 10:30. Address is 611 Harbor Street, Suite 420. Wear something appropriate. This is important for Caleb and for the family. Please don't make this difficult. Before I could type anything, Dad sent a separate text to just me. Come early. 10 o'clock, we need all signatures smooth before investors arrive. Bring ID, don't bring an attitude. Mom is nervous. Then Caleb followed at 7:23. Row, please. Just show up, smile, sign where Priya tells you, and we can all move on. This is literally payroll. I took a screenshot of all 3 messages before I answered. That had become a reflex with my family, the same way some people checked the stove twice before leaving. I wrote back, what documents am I being asked to sign? Mom replied almost immediately. Standard closing papers. You don't need to review everything in advance. Priya will explain. That was the first condition. Arrive, don't ask. The second came 10 minutes later, when Dad called and I let it go to voicemail. His message was only 31 seconds. Rowan, it's Dad. Your mother and I are asking you to be supportive. Caleb's people are going to be there, and it would be humiliating if you start one of your document routines in front of them. Bring your driver's license, no binders, no accusations. Just be normal for an hour. I played it twice, not because I enjoyed it, but because no binders told me exactly what they were afraid of. By Thursday night, I had my outfit hanging on the back of my bedroom door. Navy slacks, a cream blouse with covered buttons, black flats, and Grandpa's old Timex watch with the scratched face. I didn't wear the watch to be dramatic. I wore it because it still kept time, and because Grandpa had once tapped that watch against a courthouse counter and told me, people rush you when they don't want you to notice the wrong thing. On Friday morning, I took the 842 bus from Linden Avenue instead of asking anyone for a ride. I didn't want to be trapped in Dad's SUV afterward with Mom sighing from the passenger seat and Caleb texting investors from the back. The bus smelled like wet wool and coffee. I sat by the middle doors with my tote bag on my lap and watched the blocks change from laundromats and duplexes to glass offices with fake olive trees in the lobbies. I packed exactly 7 things. My driver's license, because Dad had mentioned it twice. My blue pen, because I'd learned not to use whatever pen someone pushed toward me. The red rope tax receipt file from Grandpa's cabinet, wrapped in a grocery bag so the corners wouldn't fray more than they already had. The photocopy of the recorded deed I'd pulled from county records the week before, with parcel 2479 Hawthorne Lane circled in pencil. The voicemail from Dad saved to my phone, not packed exactly, but ready in the family folder with the date visible. A slim folder with blank paper for notes. And a granola bar, because family emergencies always seemed to skip lunch and then blame the person who got lightheaded. I did not bring a binder. Technically, Dad won that argument. At 9:51, I stepped off the bus on Harbor Street. North Point Title was on the 4th floor of a gray building wedged between a dental implant office and a wealth management firm. In the lobby, a digital directory glowed blue. North Point Title and Escrow, Suite 420. My phone buzzed before I reached the elevator. Mom, we are already here. Please be calm when you walk in. Then another from Caleb. Investors are in the conference room. Don't embarrass me. I looked at both messages, then slid my phone into the outside pocket of my tote where I could reach it fast. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped in alone, holding Grandpa's red rope file against my ribs like it was something breakable. The elevator opened onto the 4th floor at 10:03. North Point Title had a glass door with gold vinyl letters, and beneath the logo, someone had taped a white sign that said Willowbend Property Closing, Hart Family, 10:30 a.m. in a plastic sleeve. Through the glass, I could already see too many people. The receptionist looked up from behind a half-moon desk. Her nameplate said Alina. She had a headset on and a stack of visitor badges beside a bowl of peppermints. Rowan Hart? She asked before I gave my name. Yes. She glanced down at a printed check-in sheet and made a small mark beside my name. Not a check. A circle. You're the last principal party. It's 10:03. I know, she said quietly, then slid a badge toward me. Conference room B. Ms. Manon is with another client for a few more minutes. She asked that nobody sign anything until she's present. That sentence slowed me down more than the badge did. I clipped it to my blouse and followed the hallway past framed maps of county parcels. Conference room B had frosted glass walls from waist height up, so I could see shapes moving before I reached the door. A foam board sign stood on an easel outside. Hart Family Closing and Seed Funding Briefing. Under that, in smaller print, North Point Title, thanks you for your cooperation. Briefing, not closing. Not just paperwork. Inside, the long table was set like a dinner where nobody planned to eat. 14 people were there, not counting me. Mom and Dad sat on the left side near the head of the table. Caleb sat beside a man in a charcoal blazer who had a silver laptop open and a tiny microphone clipped to his collar. Aunt Linda was near the window with Uncle Ray. 2 of Caleb's college friends stood by the credenza pretending to study the coffee machine. 3 older investors I recognized from Dad's Rotary Barbecue had folders in front of them. Cousin Erin sat at the far end, half behind a potted plant, wearing her nurse scrubs and holding a paper cup with both hands. There were Danish pastries on a tray, a pitcher of cucumber water, and a neat stack of glossy one-page agendas at each chair. Mine was at the only empty seat, directly across from Caleb, with a blue North Point pen laid diagonally on top like it was waiting for a signature. The agenda said, 10 o'clock arrival and introductions, 10:10 founder remarks, 10:20 family consent acknowledgement, 10:30 attorney review and execution, 10:45 funds release coordination. I stayed standing. Dad's jaw tightened when he saw the red rope file tucked under my arm. Mom's smile turned bright and hard, the smile she used at church when someone asked why Caleb hadn't visited Grandma in rehab. There she is, Caleb said. Too loud, Rohan made it. The man with the microphone stood and held out his hand. Evan Cole. I'm coordinating the first tranche for the startup group. I shook his hand because 15 faces were watching. His palm was dry and quick. Rowan, Mom pushed the empty chair back with her fingertips. Sweetheart, sit down. We've already been through the family portion. It says family consent acknowledgement at 10:20, I said, looking at the agenda. It's 10:06, Aunt. Linda made a tiny noise into her coffee. Dad leaned forward. Don't start with the clock. I'm reading what's on the paper. Cousin Erin's eyes moved from my face to the packet at my place setting. She frowned. Not at me. At the top page. I set my tote on the floor but kept Grandpa's file in my hand. The closing packet in front of my chair was clipped with a black binder clip. A yellow sticky note sat on top in Mom's handwriting. Sign tabs only. Don't slow Priya down. Below the sticky note, on the visible draft page, there was a consent line with my printed name. Rowan Elise Hart. Beside it, in a narrow margin, someone had already written 2 small initials. RH. They were cramped, tilted left, and connected at the bottom like one nervous word. Mine never connected. Grandpa used to tease me because I lifted the pen between every letter. I didn't touch the page. I looked up, and Erin was still watching the same initials. She gave the smallest shake of her head, barely more than a blink. Mom noticed. Rowan, please don't make a scene over draft formatting. I haven't said anything yet. Caleb laughed once. A short business laugh for the investors. This is why we wanted everyone early. Rowan gets very intense about documents. Alina appeared in the doorway holding a slim folder against her chest. Ms. Manon will be in at 10:30 as scheduled, she said. Her eyes went to the packet, then to me. And she repeated, no signatures, initials, or acknowledgments before she enters the room. Dad looked at the table. I pulled out the chair slowly, sat down, and placed Grandpa's red rope file flat on my lap where no one could mistake it for a purse. The minute Alina stepped away from the doorway, Mom started arranging the meeting like a holiday photo where I was the child who wouldn't smile. Rowan, sweetheart, maybe sit at the far end, she said, tapping the empty chair beside the credenza instead of the place card with my name on it. This part is really for people who understand the financing. My place card was printed on North Point cardstock, Rowan Hart family consent. It sat 2 chairs from Dad and directly across from Evan Cole, who had a leather portfolio, a silver pen, and the kind of patient expression people use when they've already decided you're the delay. "I'm fine here," I said. Aunt Lissa gave a tiny cough into her fist. Uncle Mark looked at the ceiling tiles. My brother Caleb, in his new navy blazer, leaned toward one of the investors and whispered, "Not quietly enough. She gets overwhelmed by paperwork." Mom heard him and didn't correct him. She leaned into it. "We've had a rough few years with Rowan," she said to the table, smiling like she was apologizing for a late caterer. "After Dad passed, she became very attached to certain objects. Files, receipts, old mail. We try to be gentle about it." The red rope file on my lap suddenly weighed twice as much. One of the investors, a woman named Marla with a gold watch and a tablet open to a spreadsheet, glanced at my file and then at Mom. "Is there a capacity issue we should be aware of?" "No," I said, before Mom could dress that word in lace. "There is a document issue." Dad shifted in his chair. "Rowan, don't start." Evan Cole slid a single-page agenda toward me with 2 fingers. "No one is asking you to approve investment terms. The family acknowledgement is just housekeeping, so we can proceed when Ms. Manon arrives." "It has my initials on it already," I said. Caleb laughed once, sharp and embarrassed. "Are we really doing this?" In front of everyone. Cousin Erin, still standing near the wall with her coffee, said, "It does have initials." Mom's eyes flashed at her, then softened for the audience. "Erin, honey, you don't know the history. Rowan has accused people of moving things since she was 12. That one landed harder than I wanted it to. Because it was specific. Because everyone who knew me could start searching their memories for proof." She hid Grandpa's receipt box for a week once. Mom continued, looking at Marla now. "Not me. We found it under her bed. I was 13, I said. And Grandpa asked me to keep it away from the basement after the water heater leaked." Dad rubbed both palms over his face. "This is not relevant." "It is relevant if you're telling investors I'm unstable." Caleb pushed back his chair an inch. "You are making my company look toxic before we even close the round. Your company scheduled a seed funding briefing inside a house closing and put my initials on a packet before the attorney walked in." Evan's pen stopped moving. For a second, all I wanted was the elevator. I could see it through the glass wall past reception. Brushed steel doors, down arrow lit, a manila envelope cart parked beside it with a FedEx pouch hanging open. I even put one hand on the red rope tie like I was going to gather my file and stand. Then I noticed the bottom corner of the draft packet in front of Dad. A yellow sticky note was half tucked under page 3. I could only read the last line because his sleeve covered the rest. "If absent refuses, attach acknowledgement of prior consent." Absent refuses. Prior consent. That was the practical detail that kept me in the chair. I reached into Grandpa's file and pulled out the thin blue tax receipt folder. The one from the county office with the staple rusted at the top and his blocky handwriting across the tab. "Willow Bend, keep with deed." I placed it on the table. Not dramatically, just far enough that Evan and Marla could see the county seal. Mom's smile tightened. "Rowan, put that away." "No." Dad whispered, "Please don't do this." I looked at the clock above the framed North Point license. 10:24. Ms. Manon said no signatures or initials before she enters. I said, "So I'm staying until she enters." Caleb muttered, "Unbelievable." I kept my hand flat on the blue folder. "And when she does, I'm asking her why your draft says I already consented." At 10:31, the glass door opened and Priya Manon came in carrying a gray laptop bag and a cardboard coffee tray with 1 cup missing. She wore a navy suit and had a stack of tabbed folders under her arm. The receptionist pointed her toward conference room B, and all 14 people did that awkward shuffle where they pretended they hadn't just been arguing over a dead man's deed. Priya set her bag at the head of the table. "Good morning. I'm Priya Menon, closing attorney for North Point Title. Before we begin, I need all phones off the table unless you're a party signing remotely, and no one signs anything until I verify identity and authority." Mom immediately reached for her purse and gave this soft, wounded laugh. "Thank you. We've been trying to keep Rowan calm." I looked up from the blue tax receipt folder. Priya didn't answer Mom. She opened her laptop and said, "I'll need government IDs from the sellers first." Dad slid his license across. Mom slid hers. Then Caleb, who wasn't even a seller, pushed a glossy investor packet toward Priya, like he was presenting a pitch deck. "This is the Usavun summary. The sale proceeds go into escrow for North Star Shelf's seed close." Priya left it untouched. I'm not reviewing your startup materials. Marla, the investor in the cream blazer, cleared her throat. Our concern is capacity and consent. Mrs. Hales indicated there may be a mental health situation affecting one heir. There it was, out loud, in front of everyone. Mom put her hand to her chest. I said she's been unstable since her grandfather passed, hoarding papers, accusing us of stealing. She's not well, and she keeps trying to derail Caleb's chance because she resents him. Aunt Denise whispered, Karen. Mom kept going. We had her consent already. She initialed the draft acknowledgement at the kitchen table on the 7th. She's just embarrassed now because she changed her mind. Priya's eyes moved to me. Not soft, not harsh, just direct. Ms. Hales, did you initial a draft acknowledgement on the 7th? No, I said. I was in Dayton on the 7th for a work inventory. I have the time card in my email if you need it, and the initials on Dad's packet aren't mine. Dad rubbed the side of his face. Rowan, don't turn this into Priya, raised one finger, and he stopped. Show me the draft, she said. Dad hesitated just long enough for Uncle Mark to look at him. Then Dad opened the closing packet to the page with the yellow sticky note still attached. Priya pulled on a pair of thin reading glasses from her laptop bag. She read the note first. If absent refuses, attach acknowledgement of prior consent, she said aloud. Caleb leaned forward. That was just procedural language. Who wrote this? Priya asked. No one answered. Mom reached across the table like she was going to peel the sticky note off. Priya put her palm over the page before Mom touched it. Do not alter the packet, Priya said. Mom's face tightened. I was just moving trash. It is not trash once it's in a closing file. Priya turned the page around. On the draft acknowledgement, beside a paragraph saying, I waived notice of any retained interest under the Hawthorne Lane transfer clause, were two small initials. RH, the R, was looped at the top like Mom's handwriting on birthday cards. Mine was blocky because I'd broken my wrist in 9th grade and never wrote cursive comfortably again. Priya looked from the initials to me. For the record, do you deny placing these initials here? I deny it, I said. Marla sat back slowly. One of the younger investors stopped tapping his pen. Mom gave a sharp breath. This is ridiculous. Rowan initials things like that all the time. She forgets, she gets dramatic, and then we all have to pay for it. Priya clicked something on her laptop. Mrs. Hales, I need you to stop characterizing her. If you are alleging prior consent, I need the original document. Date, witness, delivery method, and who requested the clause be waived. Caleb's jaw moved, but no words came out. I slid Grandpa's blue folder across the table, careful not to disturb the frayed red rope tied around it. This has the county tax receipts and the recorded deed reference. Grandpa wrote, keep with deed on the front. Priya opened it like it was evidence, not family junk. The top receipt was from the county treasurer, stamped paid, with Hawthorne Lane's parcel number in blue ink. Behind it was a photocopy of the recorded deed book and page. Priya compared it to the closing packet, then reached into her own tabbed folder and removed a certified copy with the county seal. The recorded deed controls, she said, and this deed contains a transfer clause naming Rowan Hales individually. This sale cannot close today without her valid signature, and I am not accepting disputed initials as consent. Mom stared at Priya as if politeness itself had betrayed her. Dad whispered, Karen, what did you sign? Priya shut the packet halfway. We're pausing this closing. Priya didn't raise her voice. She just picked up the black office phone on the credenza behind her and pressed one button. Monica, can you bring in the recorder's certification page for instrument 201644782 and the tax receipt file for Hawthorne Lane? Please. That was the first time the room felt less like a family argument and more like a real closing. Paper was about to outrank volume. Caleb shoved his laptop shut. This is insane. We have people here. One of his investors, a man in a navy vest who had introduced himself as Trent, checked his watch. We were told title was clear. It may be clear, Priya said, but clear title does not mean every required person has consented. Mom made a small laugh, the kind she used at church luncheons when someone spilled coffee. Rowan is making this sound criminal. It's a misunderstanding. Her grandfather loved all of us. Priya looked at her over the top of her glasses. Then the document should reflect that at 10:38. Monica came in carrying two things. A pale green file folder stamped County Recorder's certified copy and Grandpa's old blue tax folder, the one Dad had brought from the house in a grocery bag and then acted like it was junk. The corner still had Grandpa's handwriting in black marker. Willow Bend taxes, Rowan clause. Seeing those words on something that had sat for years in our hall closet made my throat tighten, but I kept both hands flat on the conference table. I was not going to apologize for reading Priya opened the certified deed first. The paper made that stiff legal crackle as she turned to the second page. I'm reading from the recorded deed dated August 19, 2016. Grantor Ellis Hales. Grantees Martin and Karen Hales. Husband and wife with a reserved transfer condition. Uncle Drew muttered. Reserved what? Priya continued, tapping the paragraph with her pen. Upon any sale, transfer, refinance, or encumbrance of the residence, commonly known as 1148 Hawthorne Lane Court, Rowan Hales shall receive written notice and shall execute consent to release her individual transfer interest, or the transaction shall not proceed. The word individual sat there like a brick on the table. Dad covered his mouth with his hand. Aunt Lisa leaned forward so fast her bracelet hit her water glass. Caleb said, "That doesn't mean she owns the house." "No," Priya said. "It means she owns a required consent, right? Tied to transfer." That is enough to stop this closing. If you're watching this and you caught what my family kept skipping over, comment transfer clause. Because that phrase is the reason 14 people in a title office suddenly stopped treating me like a difficult daughter. And keep watching, because the consequence of that one paragraph hit faster than anyone expected. Priya slid the deed toward the center of the table, but kept one hand on it. Now, the draft packet in front of me contains initials purporting to waive notice under that clause. Mom folded her arms. Because Rowan agreed. I did not, I said. Priya opened the blue tax folder next. Inside were county tax receipts, stapled in year bundles, and one yellow envelope with Grandpa's name on it. On the 2019 receipt, under the mailing notes, someone had highlighted, "Copy 2R Hales per deed condition." Dad stared at the highlight. I remember those coming. Mom snapped, "Martin." He flinched. Priya looked at him. "Mr. Hales, did your office or household receive annual copies referencing Ms. Hales?" Dad's face had gone gray around the mouth. The county mailed duplicates. Ellis set it up before he died. So the family had notice of the clause, Priya said. Trent pushed his chair back an inch. "Caleb, you told us the delay risk was your sister being emotional about childhood memories." Caleb didn't answer him. He was looking at Mom now. Priya removed the draft acknowledgement from the closing packet and placed it beside the recorded deed. The fake RH initials looked tiny next to Grandpa's recorded paragraph. "I need everyone to understand," she said. "This is no longer a rushed signature issue. This is a disputed consent issue. I am suspending the closing file pending written review." Mom's voice dropped low. "Priya, we can step into another room." "No," Priya said. "Not with disputed initials in a packet presented at a closing." Across the table, Dad whispered again, but this time not to Mom. He looked at me. "Rowan," he said, "did your grandfather ever tell you about this?" I picked up my phone, checked the date on the screen, 10:42 a.m., said, "He told me to read anything with Hawthorne Lane on it before I signed." Dad didn't answer me right away. He reached for the blue tax folder like it might explain something different if he touched it himself. Priya held up one hand. "Mr. Hales, please don't remove anything from that file. I'm going to mark what's been shown in the order it came out." She took 3 yellow sticky tabs from a dispenser near her monitor and wrote in neat block letters, "Deed, tax receipts, draft consent." Then she slid the recorded deed to the left, the Hawthorne Lane tax file to the center, and the closing packet with the RH initials to the right. It made the table look less like a family argument and more like a timeline. Caleb's investor Trent leaned forward, elbows on the walnut conference table. "Can someone give me the practical version? Is this a signature issue or an ownership issue?" "Both," Priya said, "but one at a time." She tapped the recorded deed. Instrument 201-644-782. Recorded August 19, 2016. Grantor Ellis Hales, grantees Mark Hales and Linda Hales. Husband and wife, with a transfer condition in favor of Rowan Hales individually. Mom's mouth tightened at individually. Priya continued, "The clause does not make Rowan a co-owner of record in the ordinary way. It creates a written consent requirement before transfer, sale, or encumbrance of 1148 Hawthorne Lane Court. That means this closing packet cannot treat her consent as optional." Uncle Dennis, who had spent the whole morning acting like he was only there for moral support and danishes, pushed his paper plate away. "Linda, you said Ellis put in some sentimental note. You didn't say it blocked a sale." Mom snapped because that's not what he meant. Priya looked at her. "Meaning is not what I'm reviewing. I'm reviewing recorded language." Then she opened the tax receipt file. The folder smelled like basement cardboard and old toner. Inside were copies of county tax receipts, clipped in yearly groups. Priya flipped to 2017 first. First year after recording, she said, tax receipt notice for Hawthorne Lane court mailed to Mark and Linda Hales at the property address. Duplicate notice mailed to Rowan Hales at... She paused and looked at me. Your college apartment? Red Maple Apartments. I said, Unit 3B. I was 20. Dad rubbed the side of his face. I remember those envelopes. Mom turned on him. Mark. He didn't look at her. They came every January. Priya moved to the next receipt. 2018. Same duplicate notation. 2019. Same 2020. Address changed to Rowan Hales. 62 Ash Street. That was my first apartment after I moved back. I said, Aunt Carol whispered, so this wasn't hidden. No, Priya said. The county receipt file suggests the condition was administratively recognized for years. Caleb pushed back from the table so fast his chair wheels hit the credenza. Okay, but none of that means Mom forged anything. It means the title company should have caught it sooner. Priya turned the draft consent page toward him without raising her voice. This packet was sent to us with Rowan's initials already placed beside the consent acknowledgement. The email attached to the draft said, Rowan reviewed and is fine. Initials added per family authorization. Trent's head lifted. Who sent that email? Priya clicked her mouse. The large wall monitor woke from black to the North Point title portal. She didn't display private financial pages, just the message header and attachment list. Received Monday, June 3rd, 7:14 p.m. from Linda Hales. Subject, revised Hawthorne Lane closing packet for Friday. Mom's face went flat, like she'd decided expression was a liability. Dad stared at the monitor. Linda, it was a draft. Mom said, everyone is acting like I signed her life away. I picked up the consent page, careful to touch only the corner. The initials were too round, too decorative. The H looped the way Mom looped hers on Christmas cards. Mine had always been cramped and ugly because Grandpa used to joke my handwriting looked like a grocery list written in a moving truck. Priya said, Mrs. Hales, did Rowan place these initials? Mom looked past me, toward Trent and the two men beside him in navy quarter zips. Rowan has been under a lot of stress. She gets suspicious about documents. We were trying to keep the process from becoming another episode. There it was again, polished for outsiders. I didn't argue with the word episode. I opened my phone instead, went to my email, and searched Hawthorne Lane while Priya waited. The conference room air conditioner clicked on above us. At 10:49 a.m., I found the message from Mom dated June 3rd, 6:52 p.m. Rowan, don't come Friday if you're going to nitpick. Caleb needs this clean. We'll handle the title people. I turned my phone around and placed it on the table between the deed and the forged initials. Dad read it first, then Trent did. Caleb didn't move from the credenza. He just said, quieter now. Mom, what did you send them? Caleb finally pushed off the credenza like he'd been waiting for a cue. Okay, he said, holding both hands up, palms out, the same way he did in investor pitch videos. Everybody take a breath. This is turning into a character assassination over a clerical mistake. Mom grabbed onto that immediately. Yes, exactly. Linda was trying to help. I was trying to keep this from becoming one of Rowan's episodes. I didn't answer her. I was watching Caleb. He walked to the end of the conference table, past the stale coffee tray and the stack of blue North Point folders, and aimed his voice at Trent and the two investors beside him. My sister gets overwhelmed by paperwork. He said, that's all this is. We had a family understanding for years. The house was always supposed to support the family. And right now, the company is what supports the family. Priya's pen stopped moving. I turned one page in the closing packet, slow enough that the paper made a clean scrape against the table. A family understanding doesn't remove a recorded deed. Caleb gave me a tired smile. Rowan, Grandpa added, your name when you were a kid because you were living there. It wasn't some secret trust fund. That's not what the transfer clause says. It's old language. Caleb said quickly. Everyone knows old property documents have weird language. Priya looked up from her legal pad. Mr. Hales, please don't characterize recorded language if you haven't reviewed it. He blinked at her, then recovered. I'm just saying this can be resolved after closing. We escrow whatever she thinks she's owed, and we don't blow up a funding deadline over... No, Priya said. It was one word, but it landed harder than anything I'd said. Trent leaned back in his chair. Why no? Priya slid the recorded deed from her folder, the copy with the county stamp on the top right corner. She placed it in the open space between the water bottles and rotated it toward Trent. Because the transfer clause is not about money owed after closing. She said, It restricts authority to convey title unless Rowan Hales signs as a named holder. If she doesn't sign knowingly, we don't insure this transaction. Caleb's jaw tightened, but she was copied on taxes. She knew. Dad moved then, too fast, and knocked his knee against the underside of the table. Caleb? I reached for the brown tax receipt file Priya had opened earlier. The metal prong snagged for a second before I freed the next section. Actually, let's talk about copied. Caleb's eyes flicked to the folder. Inside was a smaller envelope I hadn't noticed until Priya tabbed it with a yellow sticker during the break. It was labeled by the county treasurer, not by my family. Returned forwarding history. Priya nodded once, giving me permission. I opened it and pulled out the printed address log. Not a dramatic document. Just thin county paper with dates, addresses, and delivery notes. 2017, I read, duplicate tax notice mailed to 88 Larkspur Drive. My college apartment, forwarded 2018, sent to my first apartment in Denver. 2019, sent to my P.O. box when I moved for work. 2020 through 2023, mailed to my current address. Mom muttered, that doesn't prove you understood anything. No, I said. It proves the county understood I belonged on the file. Then I turned to the last page. This one had Dad's name on the contact line. February 12th, 2024. Change request denied. Removal of secondary notice. Recipient requires recorded instrument or recipient authorization. I said it in front of Dad. His face went blotchy around the collar of his white shirt. Caleb stared at it. What is that? Dad didn't pick it up. It was just a mailing issue. Priya reached across and tapped the line with the cap of her pen. It was a request to stop Rowan receiving duplicate tax notices. Trent's investor, a woman named Marisol, who had barely spoken all morning, sat forward. Who made that request? Priya turned the page sideways so everyone could see the signature box. Dad's name was typed beneath it, but the email address listed above the request was Caleb's company admin account. Caleb's mouth opened, then closed. Mom whispered, Caleb was only helping your father. I looked at my brother. You told them I was confused by old documents, but you tried to make sure I stopped receiving them. He rubbed both hands over his face, then dropped them. Because every time your name came up, this family froze. The deal froze. Dad froze. I was trying to get one clean transaction done before the bridge note expired. So not a misunderstanding, I said. He looked past me, at the investors, not at my face. A timing problem. Priya pulled the document back into her file. No, a title problem. Priya didn't argue with Caleb in front of the investors. She closed the blue closing packet, put one palm on top of it, and said, I'm taking 5 minutes. No one leaves with originals. Then she slid the recorded deed, the tax receipt file, and the draft consent packet into her black accordion folder. The metal tab clicked shut. Mom stood up so fast her chair legs scraped the conference room floor. Aunt Denise reached for her purse. One of Caleb's investors, the man in the gray vest, checked his phone and muttered something about a 3:30 call. Dad still hadn't answered the question about the February 12th request. Priya pointed toward the frosted glass side room across the hall. Rowan, if you need a private moment, use conference B. I'll stay outside the door, I'm coming. Mom said. No. Priya said, not loud, just final. Only if Rowan agrees. For 1 second, I almost said yes. That was my mistake. Even after everything printed in front of me, even after seeing someone put my initial on a consent draft I hadn't touched, my first instinct was still to make Mom less embarrassed. I hated that about myself in that moment. I took my water bottle, the one I'd been twisting the cap on for an hour, and walked into Conference B alone. The room was smaller, with 2 chairs, a wall calendar still on April, and a fake orchid on the table with dust on the leaves. Through the glass, I could see shapes moving in the hallway. Caleb's shoulders. Mom's cream blazer. Dad standing with his hands in his pockets like he was waiting out bad weather. I sat down but didn't close the door all the way. Mom came to the threshold anyway. Rowan, she said, in the voice she used when company was over, soft around the edges. Can we talk like adults? I looked at Priya, who was standing 2 steps behind her. Priya asked, do you want her in? I should have said no immediately. Instead, I said, 2 minutes. Mom stepped in and closed the door halfway with her fingertips. Like that made it polite. She didn't sit. She smoothed the front of her blazer and whispered, you are humiliating your father. I stared at the fake orchid because if I looked at her face, I knew I'd start explaining myself. He typed his name onto a county form to remove my notices. You don't know that? Then he can say that. Mom's jaw tightened. This is exactly why I told them you were fragile right now. You take one paper and turn it into a family trial. There it was. Not an apology, not even a denial about the initial. Just the role she had built for me before I walked into North Point title. Unstable daughter, overwhelmed sister, obstacle with feelings too messy to count. I set my water bottle on the table. The plastic made a hollow sound. I hesitated. I said, Mom blinked. What? When Priya asked if I wanted to step out, I almost asked you to come with me because I still wanted you to tell me I wasn't being difficult. Her expression softened a little, like she thought I was finally coming back to the script. I kept going. That's the mistake I'm admitting. Not reading the deed. Not asking why my name was on the tax receipts. Not questioning an initial I didn't write. My mistake was still hoping you'd protect me from the people calling me selfish when you were one of them. Her mouth opened, then closed. From the hall, Caleb's voice cut through. Mom, we're running out of time. She turned toward the door. Your brother has payroll Friday. I have a recorded interest in that house. I said, Grandpa put it there on purpose. Grandpa didn't understand startups. No, but he understood pressure. That landed. Her eyes flicked down to the folder in Priya's hand through the glass. Mom lowered her voice. If this deal dies, Caleb loses everything. If this deal needs a forged initial and a hidden notice request, then it should die. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Priya knocked once on the half-open door. Rowan, I need to document whether you are refusing to sign today or requesting independent counsel before any further discussion. Mom whispered, Don't make this official. I stood up, legs shaky but working. It already is official. That's what recorded means. Then I looked past Mom to Priya. I'm not signing today. I want copies of the deed, the transfer clause page, the tax receipt file, the returned mail history, and the draft packet with the initials. And I want the original draft preserved. Priya nodded once. Understood. Mom's face changed, then not sadness, not rage. Calculation. She stepped back into the hallway and said to Dad, loud enough for everyone to hear, Rowan needs a lawyer now. For the first time that afternoon, I didn't correct the way she said my name like a diagnosis. I picked up my water bottle, walked out of Conference B, and faced the conference room without apologizing for reading the papers before signing them. Priya didn't raise her voice. She walked back into the main conference room with my closing packet tucked under one arm and the original draft in a clear sleeve. Everyone was still sitting in the same strange arrangement. Aunt Leela by the coffee station, Uncle Mark pretending to read an email, Caleb at the far end with one knee bouncing under the table. The two investors had their folders closed now. That detail mattered. Nobody with closed folders was still excited about wiring money. Priya stood at the head of the table and said, We are not closing this sale today. Caleb pushed his chair back an inch. Priya, we have a funding deadline. I understand, she said. But North Point Title cannot proceed with a deed where a named interest holder has declined to sign, where there is a transfer clause requiring estate instruction, and where there is now a question about the authenticity of consent initials in the draft packet. Mom's mouth tightened. That's an accusation. It's a title compliance issue, Priya said. I'm stating what has to happen next. She placed 4 papers on the table in a neat row, like she was setting down evidence in a classroom. The recorded deed copy, the transfer clause page, the tax receipt file cover sheet, the draft packet with the initials page inside the sleeve. First, Priya said, tapping the deed, North Point will open an internal audit file on this transaction. That means no edits, substitutions, or revised signature pages are to be exchanged informally. Any amended closing packet will come from our office. One of Caleb's investors, the gray-haired man named Victor, looked directly at Dad. Were there informal edits? Dad rubbed the side of his jaw. We were trying to keep the paperwork simple. Priya turned to him. Mr. Ellis, I also need you to answer the question I asked earlier. Did you contact North Point on February 12th requesting that notices to Rowan Elise be removed from the seller distribution list? Dad stared at the table. Mom said. He was trying not to upset her. Priya didn't look away from Dad. I need his answer. After a long breath, Dad said yes. I asked if they had to send her everything. Caleb whispered, Dad. Priya made a note on her yellow pad. Second, because the recorded deed includes a transfer clause in Rowan Elise's name through her grandfather's estate language, we need written estate instruction before any sale can be amended or closed. That may require review by probate counsel or the attorney who handled the original transfer. Aunt Leela leaned forward. The one from Dad's file cabinet. I looked at her. Grandpa's black metal cabinet. She nodded once. The receipts and the stamped copy were in the bottom drawer when your grandmother moved to assisted living. Your mother took a folder home after Thanksgiving. Mom's chair scraped, Lila, don't start. Priya wrote that down too. Third, she said, the tax receipt file and return mail history will be preserved. If notices were redirected or withheld, that affects our compliance report and the seller certification. The younger investor, Marin, opened her folder again, but only to pull out one page. Caleb, our bridge note requires clean title and no undisclosed family claims. It's not a claim, Caleb said quickly. It's a misunderstanding. No, Priya said. It is a recorded interest that was not resolved. That was the first sentence anyone had said all day that didn't try to turn me into the problem, Priya continued. Fourth, any escrow funds connected to this proposed closing will remain on hold. New disbursements, new reimbursements, no investor pass-through payments through this closing file. If the parties wish to proceed later, there will be an amended closing, new certifications, and signatures obtained with independent review. Mom looked at me then, not pleading, not sorry, angry that the machinery had stopped. Caleb stood halfway, palms flat on the table. So what am I supposed to tell the board at 4? Priya capped her pen. Tell them the title company cannot close, because the deed requires Rowan Elise's signature and estate instruction, and because the draft packet is under review. 14 people were in that conference room, and for once the official version was not whatever Mom could say fastest. I picked up my copy packet from the edge of the table. It felt heavier than it should have. Deed, clause, receipt file, request, refusal notation. Paper had weight when someone finally admitted it counted. Dad said my name softly as I turned toward the door. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. He said, we didn't think it would get this complicated. I looked down at the blue North Point folder in my hands and said, it was complicated before I read it. You just wanted me not to notice. Then I walked out past the receptionist's desk, past the glass bowl of peppermint candies, and into the parking lot with the documents under my arm. In the parking lot, the sun was hitting the windshield so hard I had to stand beside a landscaping truck to read the tab on the folder. North Point title, 3:47 p.m. The timestamp was printed across a receipt. Priya had clipped to the front, closing paused pending deed clause review and internal audit. That one line felt cleaner than anything my family had said all day. I sat in my car for a few minutes with the engine off, the blue folder flat across my knees. My phone kept lighting up in the cup holder. Caleb called twice. Mom called once. Then a text came from an unknown number that I recognized from the investor list Priya had passed around. Rowan, this is Martin Ellery. We were told there was a family misunderstanding. Please advise if you intend to obstruct the transaction. I stared at the word obstruct until the screen dimmed. I typed, please direct questions to North Point title and closing attorney Priya Menon. I will not discuss recorded deed issues by text. Then I took a screenshot before sending it. A minute later, Aunt Leela called. Are you still there? She asked. I'm in the parking lot. Don't go home alone if you think your mother will be there. I looked at the rearview mirror even though I knew nobody was behind me. Why? Because when we got back from Thanksgiving, that black metal cabinet in Dad's office was unlocked. The hanging folder labeled Rowan Transfer was gone. I didn't say anything then because your mother told me your dad had taken it to the accountant. I closed my hand around the steering wheel. Did the accountant ever mention it? No. And I called him 10 minutes ago. He said he hasn't had any estate paperwork from your parents since 2019. Leela's voice was tight in a way I wasn't used to hearing. She was the aunt who brought grocery store cupcakes to every birthday because children remember frosting, not fondant. She hated conflict. If she was making calls, it meant she was scared too. I'm going to the house. I said, Rowan, not inside. I just want pictures of the cabinet and the office before anything disappears. She was quiet for a second. I'll meet you there. 15 minutes. On the drive over, I passed the bank where Mom had opened my first savings account and the middle school where Dad used to pick me up late because Caleb's practices ran over. I used to tell myself being easy made me loved. If I didn't need much, if I found my own ride, if I signed whatever permission slip got shoved in front of me, then nobody had to choose me last out loud. That was the bargain I had made as a kid without knowing I was making it. Be useful. Be quiet. Don't embarrass the family. Don't ask why your name is only important when it can be used. At 4:12, I pulled up across from the house that was apparently simple enough to sell but complicated enough to hide from me. The maple by the curb still had the rope scar from Caleb's tire swing. The porch light was on even though it was broad daylight. Aunt Lila's silver Honda was already there. She got out, holding a manila envelope against her chest. I brought copies of what I had. She said, "Not much. A tax receipt from 2020 with your name in the memo line, and a photocopy of one page your grandfather mailed me after he changed the deed." I took the envelope but didn't open it yet. Through the front window, I saw movement in the dining room. Mom's beige coat was hanging over a chair. Dad's voice carried faintly through the glass. Then Caleb's, sharp and fast. Leela touched my elbow. "You don't owe them a private conversation right now." For the first time all day, I didn't argue with that. I stood on the sidewalk and photographed the front of the house, the mailbox, the date stamp on my phone screen, and Lila holding the envelope. Then I texted Priya, "Additional possible estate documents located. I am preserving copies and will not exchange originals without written instruction." When I hit send, Mom opened the front door. She didn't step onto the porch. She just looked at the folder under my arm and said, "Are you happy now?" I looked back at her from the public sidewalk with Aunt Lila beside me and the North Point packet in my hand. "No," I said, "but I'm done being ashamed for reading before I sign." If you've ever been pressured to sign something because family knows best, let this be your reminder. Read it anyway. By 6:40 that evening, Aunt Leela and I were sitting in the copier corner of the FedEx on Halsted, feeding Grandpa's photocopied DI change page through the scanner, one sheet at a time. The machine made that tired squeak every third page, and Leela kept smoothing the paper with the side of her hand like it might tear if she breathed wrong. The D-change page wasn't dramatic. That was the worst part. It was plain county language, dated March 3, 2020, with Grandpa's name, the parcel number for the house, and one paragraph labeled Retained Transfer Condition. It said any sale or encumbrance of the property required my written consent if I had not received the family transfer payment described in the attached schedule. Leela had only the photocopy, but the recording stamp was clear enough to read. At 7:12, I emailed Priya Menon with a scan. The tax receipt Leela found, my photos from the sidewalk, and the screenshot of Martin Ellery's text. Subject line, North Point closing audit, Rowan transfer clause supporting documents. I wrote 3 sentences, deleted 2 that sounded like begging, and sent only the facts. Priya replied at 8:03. Received, please do not communicate further with investors or family members regarding the transaction terms tonight. I am requesting a certified copy from the county recorder and revising the closing file hold notice. I will also segregate the draft packet containing the disputed initials. I read that last line twice. Disputed initials. Not misunderstanding, not family conflict. Disputed. At 8:19, Caleb called. I let it go to voicemail while Leela bought 2 bottles of water and a pack of peanut butter crackers from the counter. His voicemail was 46 seconds. Ro, just call me back. Martin is freaking out. Mom's crying. Dad says Priya won't even answer him now. I don't know what you want me to do here. If this falls apart, I'm not sure there's a company left Monday. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't ask about the initial dot at 8:31. Dad texted, your mother made a mistake because she was under pressure. We all were. Don't punish the whole family. I stared at the word mistake until the screen dimmed. Then another message came in from Mom, but not to me directly. It was in the extended family group chat, the one with 14 people and 3 profile pictures that were just gray circles. I want everyone to know Rowan has always been loved and included. Today was a stressful misunderstanding being exaggerated by outside parties. Please don't feed gossip. Aunt Leela leaned over my shoulder and said, outside parties, Priya's the closing attorney. Uncle Dennis replied with a thumbs up. Cousin Marin wrote, maybe this should stay private. Then, 2 minutes later, Marin texted me separately. I didn't know about the clause. Mom told us you were refusing because you wanted attention. I'm sorry I repeated that to Aaron. That was how the social fallout arrived. Not as one big apology, but as little corrections leaking through side doors. At 9:05, North Point sent an automated secure message notification. Inside the portal, the closing status had changed from pending seller signatures to administrative hold title review. The seller disbursement worksheet was gone. The investor escrow instructions were marked superseded. A new document sat at the top of the packet, notice of draft irregularity and consent verification. My name was spelled correctly. My address was corrected too, changed from my parents' house to my apartment on Kedzie. Someone had also removed Caleb's company email from the notification list. The next morning, Wednesday, I called the county recorder from my desk before work. I wrote the clerk's name, Mateo, on a yellow sticky note because I was done having conversations disappear. He confirmed a certified copy could be picked up after 2 p.m. with ID and $12.50. At 10:17, Priya called. I received the county confirmation. She said, I could hear keyboard clicks behind her. The clause is recorded. Your consent is required unless the transfer payment was satisfied. I have no evidence that it was. So what happens now? Now I send a corrected notice to all closing parties and Rowan. Yeah, the initial on the draft consent does not match the initials on your intake form or driver's license acknowledgement. I'm referring that issue to our compliance department. I closed my office door with 2 fingers and sat down slowly. By lunch, Caleb emailed me, not a text, an email with a subject line that sounded like a board memo. Request to discuss path forward. He wrote that the company had payroll due Friday, that the investors needed clarity, and that he hoped we could separate paperwork concerns from personal resentment. I printed it. I hole punched it. I put it behind Martin's text and Mom's group chat statement in a folder. I labeled House Sale Communications. That afternoon, Mom left one voicemail. Her voice was controlled, almost polite. I shouldn't have said unstable. I was scared. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. I saved the file without answering. Not because I had a plan to destroy anyone. Because for once, the documents were moving faster than the family story about me. The next morning started at 6:12 with the kettle clicking off in my apartment. Not a lawyer's email, not Mom's voice note, not Caleb's payroll emergency. I made toast, fed Miso her half scoop of dry food, and taped a small paper schedule to the inside of my kitchen cabinet. Work, lunch, county recorder, groceries, no calls after 8. It looked childish, like something a school counselor would hand out, but it kept me from staring at my phone until my coffee went cold. At 10:40, I took my lunch break early and drove to the county recorder's office on Hollis Street. The lobby smelled like wet coats and printer toner. A man ahead of me was arguing about a marriage license correction, and a contractor in a neon vest kept dropping quarters into the copy machine. When my number was called, I gave the clerk the parcel number Priya had written on a sticky note. Certified copy of the recorded deed and any attached transfer clause, I said. She didn't ask why. She just typed, clicked through 2 screens, and slid a payment slip toward me. $8 for the first page, $2 each additional. Certification is $6. I paid with my debit card, the receipt printed with the date, 11:03 a.m., and the parcel number lined up cleanly across the middle. I put it straight into the blue folder Aunt Leela had given me, the one with an elastic band and coffee stain near the corner. While I waited, my phone buzzed. Caleb, can we meet without lawyers? I looked at the message for a full minute before typing back. Me, you can send anything about the house through Priya or in writing. The 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Caleb, you're making it impossible to fix. I put the phone face down on my knee. The clerk came back with the certified deed, the county seal raised and shiny on the last page. I sat in my car afterward and read the clause twice. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. Grandpa had not left me a sentimental sentence. He had left instructions. Written consent, transfer payment satisfied, no sale or encumbrance without one of those 2 things. At 2:18, Priya emailed, North Point Compliance has completed its preliminary review. The altered draft packet will remain segregated from the closing file. North Point will not proceed without a revised packet and independent written consent from all required parties. We have noted your objection to the initials attributed to you. No apology, no dramatic punishment, just the kind of clean language people use when they are making a record. I printed it at work before I left, using the old HP by the supply closet that jammed if you loaded more than 15 pages. My supervisor, Denise, walked in while I was labeling the folder. You okay? She asked, getting there. She looked at the stack, county receipt, certified deed, Priya's email, tax receipt, file copy, communication log. Good, she said. Use a binder clip. Staples, tear. That was the first advice all week that didn't come with a demand. By Friday, my life had smaller edges again. I stopped at the laundromat on Maple because my building's dryer still smelled like burned rubber. I bought chicken thighs, rice, and a bag of clementines. I paid my electric bill 2 days early. I moved Grandpa's old photo from my desk drawer to the bookshelf, not as a shrine, just where I could see him when I reached for a mug. Aunt Leela came over Saturday morning with bagels and a plant she said was hard to kill unless you actively insult it. She sat at my little table and read the certified deed without interrupting herself to defend anyone. Your mother knew enough to be nervous, she said finally. That's not the same as admitting it. No, Leela said. It isn't. Mom texted once that afternoon. Mom, I hope you're proud of embarrassing your family in front of people who were trying to help Caleb. I did not answer from anger. I answered from my kitchen table with the deed open beside my plate. Me, I'm not discussing this by text unless it's about the documents. She didn't reply. On Monday at 8:31, a padded envelope arrived from North Point Title. Inside was a copy of the disputed draft packet, marked void for closing use in red across every page. On page 7, beside the forged consent initial, someone had circled it and written contested by Arvale in black pen. I filed it behind Priya's email. Then I washed my coffee cup, locked the folder in the bottom drawer of my desk, and went to work. Not healed, not victorious. Just no longer available to be rushed past the line where my name began. 3 Fridays after the North Point meeting, I got one last envelope from Priya Menon. It was waiting in my mailbox when I came home from work, bent slightly at the corner, with North Point Title printed in blue across the return address. I carried it upstairs, set my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, and opened it at my kitchen table with a butter knife because I was done tearing into anything that had my name on it. Inside was a 2-page closing withdrawal notice. The sale had been formally canceled. The closing packet from that morning was listed as void. The deed issue was cited by parcel number. The draft consent initial beside my name was described as disputed and not accepted for closing reliance. Priya's signature was at the bottom in black ink. I read it once, then slid it into the same folder with the certified deed, the transfer clause, the tax receipt file, and the copy of the packet Mom had wanted me to initial in front of 14 relatives and investors. At 6:12 p.m., Caleb texted, "Investors pulled bridge funding. Hope you're happy." I stared at the message for a few seconds, then typed, "I'm not happy. I'm also not responsible for documents I didn't create." He sent back 3 dots. Then nothing. Mom called at 6:19. I let it ring. Then she called again at 6:21. On the 3rd call, I answered and put the phone on speaker while I washed the knife and dried it with a striped towel. She didn't say hello. "Do you understand what you've done to your brother?" I turned off the faucet. "Do you understand you told strangers I was unstable so I'd stop reading?" That was not the point. It was the point for me. She breathed hard into the phone. In the background, I could hear a television and a cabinet closing. Same house, same sounds I grew up with. "Your grandfather never meant for this to happen," she said. Then he wouldn't have put it in writing. That was the first time I said it without explaining, apologizing, or softening it for her. She said, "So what now? You just keep the house hostage." "No," I said. "The house is not hostage. The deed says what it says. If anyone wants to discuss a legal transfer, they can send it in writing through an attorney. I won't do hallway ambushes, dinner table pressure, or surprise packets. And I won't apologize for reading documents before signing them." For a while, there was only her breathing. Then she said, quieter, "You've gotten cold." "No," I said. "I got careful." She hung up first. I didn't cry that night. I didn't celebrate either. I put the North Point letter in the folder, locked the drawer, and walked 2 blocks to the Thai place on Halsted where Grandpa used to order extra lime wedges and pretend he wasn't stealing mine. I sat by the window with a paper cup of water, ate pad sulu from a square white bowl, and watched cars turn through the wet intersection. The emotional question I kept asking myself was whether my family would ever admit that protecting Caleb's dream had become more important than telling me the truth. By the end, I had my answer. Maybe someday one of them will say it plainly. Maybe they won't. But I don't need their confession to know where my boundary is. My name on a document is not a family favor. My signature is not a group decision. And if reading the fine print makes me difficult, then difficult is exactly what I'll be. That is the end of my story. If you were in my place, would you have signed just to keep the peace? Or would you have stopped the closing too? Tell me in the comments. If you want more stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll put the key details from this story in the description.